In the Impact segment tonight, two big stories out of Washington. Some explosive new information about the FBI's investigation into Russia's influence on the 2016 election, and more palace intrigue with the Trump administration. Joining us now from Washington, Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, the author of the book, Fortitude Faith, the rest of the Jackie Robinson story. I have a copy.
Good to see you.
I'm so glad to have one.
Thank you.
Ed, there's a reason they call it palace intrigue. It's intriguing. There have been numerous reports of internal strife between Trump advisors Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon. It was reported today that the president is not giving a full-throated endorsement of Bannon, and I don't know if you were able to hear the interview, but Sean Spicer, the press secretary, just addressed that. Is the chaos within the White House in terms of the staffing and this sort of battle becoming a distraction that the president doesn't want to see anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to two top advisors to the president this past weekend who told me that on Friday at Mar-a-Lago, it had been reported that he told these advisors, you know, get together and straighten it out. But there was another piece of it that these advisors told me, that the president went further. He said, you straighten it out or I'm going to straighten it out. And what that tells me is he's getting more involved. He's frustrated about the infighting. You see Steve Bannon there with Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, and Reince Priebus, the chief of staff. Here's the bottom line from what I'm hearing from the president's advisors. That the president liked some of the chaos early on. He likes that competitive tension when he's winning, when he was on a bit of a streak early in the administration and back in the campaign. But now that he lost the health care fight, at least round one, they hope to bring it back, and is struggling to get the tax reform battle going, he does believe in private that this is a big distraction, and he wants to move on from all this. He's certainly not going to fire his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, so Bannon and Priebus are the ones on the hot seat, and those lukewarm comments from the president about Bannon didn't help his case.
Well, okay, but so in Bannon's defense, there is a block of voters who appreciated some of the messaging that Bannon was pushing, and I know that it's hard to corral everybody and try to find consensus in a big electorate like they have, but there, I mean, he does have some very good pull with that voter base.
The best thing going for Bannon, according to these Trump advisors I've talked to, is that he does have that pull with the Trump base, the folks who are the outsiders who want to see Washington just ripped up into pieces. And there's a fear that if you push Bannon out, that's really going to split the Trump coalition, number one. Number two, it's going to give even more power to Jared Kushner and Gary Cohn, seen as sort of the Wall Street wing, the more moderate wing inside the White House. And so the bottom line is the best thing going for Bannon is two things. One, they don't want to upset that balance. They want to make sure there's an outside voice in the White House like Bannon, number one. And number two, I've talked to some presidential advisors who are fearful that if Bannon gets pushed out, he's got Breitbart and all the other allies in the alt-right movement. If he's pushed out, he may turn their guns on the White House, and they'll have even more tension. So what I've been hearing as a scenario is not Bannon losing his job, but maybe he changes titles. Maybe he moves into a new role. But people close to the president think Bannon's going to survive in some sort of role.
All right, Ed, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Now let's go to Catherine Herridge, Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent. So, Catherine, we have confirmation now that at least one Trump advisor was under surveillance during the campaign. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, so Carter Page worked for the Trump campaign for about 6 months last year. He was kind of an informal foreign policy advisor. We've interviewed him twice here at Fox News in the last 2 weeks, and his story is very consistent. He told Fox that he never worked with the Russians to help the Trump campaign, and he never worked against the interests of this country. But here's the thing, Dana. There is so much daylight between what Carter Page is saying on the record and these anonymous sources who allege that he was somehow the campaign's point of contact for Russia. And it's very tough to reconcile these two stories. I
find it interesting that Carter Page continues to agree to do interviews on the record. I mean, is that on the advice of counsel, or is he not worried about advice of counsel?
He says that he is not worried, and he's happy to tell his story because he says there's so many errors in the record, and you got to give him credit for going on the record, and you have to give some weight to the fact that he's going to answer some of these tough questions, because we didn't, you know, throw him a lot of softballs today. But on this issue of a surveillance warrant, I want to just say one thing. The FBI director has made the case that there is a very high legal bar to get one of these surveillance warrants. But I did a little research, and I found this data tonight, and what it shows is that in 2015, virtually every single request that went to the National Security Court was rubber stamped. 1,457 from the Bureau and the Justice Department. Only one was withdrawn, so 1,456.
Is that because they're pro forma and it's basically like they know exactly what they have to do to meet the bar?
We don't know what's inside the the docket that the FBI is putting to the court, but I've spoken with national security defense attorneys who say that in almost every case they say yes to the Justice Department and the FBI. So it may be a high legal bar, but the court always seems to say yes to the government.
All right, and there was one other thing, quickly, on Paul Manafort today, former campaign chairman for President Trump, who was ousted in sort of late July, August. Now, apparently, will be registering retroactively as a foreign agent?
Well, that's right. We were able to get confirmation through Justice Department sources that records have been filed, and Paul Manafort and lobbyists connected to his operation are going to register as foreign agents in light of their work that was very pro-Russia. But here's the thing. All in one day, at least 4 stories dropping on the subject sounds to me like the Democrats may be trying to change the conversation.
Coordinated, maybe. All right, Kathy.